Um, this is True Hoops. Bring it in. We're delighted today to be joined by, of course, David Thorpe and Scott Raab. Scott, I'm going to read you sent a very succinct biography.
Rab.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. This has been my whole life. I just want to take this opportunity to say slab, stab, scab, rab. That's all.
I've said it wrong for 10 years. I'm sorry.
Never forget it now.
I'm 67 now. I've been hearing Rob my whole life. It's fine. I'm sorry. I'm being rude, but I wanted to get that out there.
No, that's perfect. Okay.
Right.
Scott Raab is here.
Yes.
We're both in New Jersey. Scott was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. He wrote for Esquire magazine for 20 years, retired in 2016, wrote 2 books, The Whore of Akron and You're Welcome, Cleveland. He lives in New Jersey now. How are you, sir?
Happy to be here, guys. Thank you so much.
We have a sort of braggy thing we want to show, which is some of your work. You've interviewed essentially every famous person. Oh yeah, look at that. Who do we have here? We got The Rock, Philip
Will
Seymour
Smith,
Hoffman,
Jerry Seinfeld, Bill Murray, Jimmy
Dwight
Fallon,
Howard. Dwight Howard made the list. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Bradley Cooper, Tracy Morgan.
I think Dwight was during the lockout too. I remember, if I remember correctly. Remember the lockout? Remember the NBA lockout?
Oh, do I ever?
Good time. Compared to now, excellent times.
That's exactly.
Lockout was hard. Okay, so Scott, when you look at all of that, why is the NBA in all of that? Like, you've had this NBA thing that comes back again and again through your career. What's the deal?
I think part of it's sports, and part of it's the fact that, during the long arc, relatively and contextually long arc of my magazine career, the NBA really did emerge as the best of the American pro sports league. I mean, when I was a kid, baseball, was the national pastime, and then the NFL, which is still a monolith to be sure, but over the years, and thanks in part largely, this includes the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird years, but also the Michael years, and then the LeBron years. Those eras have swept the NBA into a position of, I think, preeminence, not just sports, culturally. And, as a magazine guy, it was an organic kind of thing, I think.
Can I read you some of my favorite exchanges you've had concerning the NBA?
I would be delighted.
Okay. This first one is a topic I've talked about this for dozens of hours of my life. You're talking to Will Smith, and you say, one thing I learned from my time covering the Cleveland team was lotion is very important.
Lotion, huge. Huge. You don't want to be ashy. No, sorry, but yeah.
No, we can take our time with this one. It's fine. Will says, what was the most important use that you saw? Just to keep the skin moist. They shower a lot. They sweat hard. They wear a lot of lotion. And up to that point, I didn't know the lotion was important. I thought it was a girly thing to do, but you got to keep moist. I'm a cocoa butter man because black people, we call it being ashy. I flake. White people get flaky, but black people get ashy. One of the worst things to do as a child is be ashy. Ashy's no good. You knew that early. My mother didn't play ashy. She was an educator? Yeah, she grew up in Pittsburgh. She went to Carnegie Mellon.
I went to a Sixers game. That was part of the Esquire thing with Will Smith. Sat in the owner's seats with Will Smith, was up on the Jumbotron with Will Smith. I'm telling you, my personal career highlights are really highlights. But it was also at that game where I had something of an epiphany, because I forget, Nerlens Noel was playing for the Sixers then. I can't even recall who the opponents were, but everyone came over, to kind of pay their respects to Will Smith. One of the things I realized is that I had never cut pro athletes enough slack. That here, Will Smith, he was making, I would think, $20 million a picture plus points, and he risked nothing, and his career could go on forever. And I had always been great at judging pro athletes harshly, as if they were two-dimensional, kind of non-human objects. And I realized at that point, these are just young guys who are risking their entire careers, I guess, because Nerlens Noel I was thinking about at the time. And, it really helped me change as a sports fan, and to some extent as a Cleveland fan, or as a LeBron hater at one time. It helped flesh out the fact that these aren't simply two-dimensional objects upon whom I can, project all my impotence and rage and suffering. these are young human beings who were trying to figure out a way to go, and who would come over and shake Will Smith's hand because they admired Will Smith. And I know this all sounds, kind of maudlin, but it struck me at that game. I mean, beyond the lotion stuff, that that maybe I should learn to right size my feelings as a sports fan, as a bitter Cleveland sports fan.
Can you describe the scene a little bit, like of a player coming to greet Will Smith? Like what?
Well, it's during shoot around, so it's before the game. I'd gotten to the arena, and then you kind of have to go into the bowels of the arena. You have to deal with Will Smith's security people. I might have ingested some cannabis beforehand. It was all
terrible accident. Yeah.
You're a pro, but you do what you have to do to maintain some semblance of balance. And so it's during shoot around. I'm next to Will Smith in the owner's seat. Forget surreal. It is a hyper real experience. And I am watching, young men, young pro athletes. And it's only when you're on the floor watching a shoot around that it really strikes you how huge everyone is. The bigger than life athletes, and also like really, really humble might be the wrong word, but they're goggle-eyed at the fact that Will Smith is sitting there, front row courtside. So they're coming over really to pay homage to him. Yeah. So I'm not, at this point, it's not a feature story. It's what Esquire called a kind of a, not what I've learned, but a Q&A. So everything gets boiled down into the Q&A, and very little of it ever gets described in the magazine. But sitting through that game, sitting next to Will Smith and watching, because it's the first time I had seen an NBA game literally from courtside, it's just an overpowering and kind of wonderful experience. This is stuff again, with the cliche, I was so lucky and privileged to enjoy. But even in the moment, it's unbelievably intense to see all that going on in front of you. The pregame part where they were coming over, literally to acknowledge Will Smith's presence was quite moving in its way.
David and I talk a lot about basically love. So if you think about these players, there's this sort of sphere of love that they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm delighted to meet Will Smith. And in that, I kind of get like, this is why they hate us, the media, right? It's because very often we're the bummer in that story. This is where the love falls apart, because like someone's getting in trouble or has a headline about them for doing something, and that's the buzzkill kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Right?
No, it's I was never a beat reporter. I never traveled with a team.
Yeah.
I never had to participate in the day-to-day locker room scrum. I could observe it. I had a couple years where the Cavs credentialed me. I mean, one of the things you realize, and it's true whether it's sports or not sports, if a plane lands safely or a player doesn't get arrested, it's not news, and it's not going to ever be talked about, much less a front page headline or front of the sports section headline. When someone messes up or a plane crashes, that's when the media is there. It is the buzzkill of all buzzkills, absolutely. And the resentment at this point, along with the general changes, a lot of which certainly in the NBA were driven by LeBron James, means that, and technology, that athletes more and more can carve out a space where the media is totally irrelevant.
Right. So I have a quick little anecdote about Will Smith in that same arena, actually. I forget what year the All-Star game was in Philadelphia, but it was a while ago now. And maybe you were there, maybe you know this story, but this is one of my favorite things I've ever seen. Stevie Wonder was there. And that's not a sort of normal NBA celebrity, right? Like there's a certain mix of players who you're tired of seeing, right? But Stevie Wonder was a whole different thing. Yep. And it's the All-Star game, and it's a special week. And he takes a seat, and Will Smith gets out of his courtside seat and runs over and up the thing, and he says whatever he says, just deferential as can be, and runs back to his seat. I'm like, wow, this is a huge deal. And but get this, as was later disclosed in a bunch of articles, and it was a fake Stevie Wonder.
No way.
Wait, what? A fake Stevie Wonder?
Some guy dressed up like Stevie Wonder, got a limo, pulled up to the back of the arena, and they were like, right this way, Mr. Wonder.
Wow.
Yeah. How about that?
Do you guys know the story of Kevin Durant with the Dream Team, a Team USA team? I want to say they were in Houston for an exhibition, and it was Durant and a few other of the world's best basketball players in this elevator. And at the same time this was happening, one of the world's best European soccer teams were in town to play an exhibition against like the Houston Galaxy. And some of those great FIFA players, soccer FIFA players, got in the elevator, and Durant and his guys were just gaga went over. And Durant supposedly said to them, "I always play you when I play FIFA." So that's kind of the same thing. They can be very humble. And most of them, let's face it, came from very humbling backgrounds. It's in their DNA. And I've often told the story when players come to see me, sometimes they're only coming for a couple of days. They'll come in, they want to say hello to me, maybe shoot for a day or two. They don't have to stay better than a Radisson. And these are guys that might be making $10 million a year. They're happy to stay to Four Seasons too.
We have a Radisson deal, Scott, just in case you're wondering.
That's a nice thing. Nothing wrong with
Radisson.
Radisson.
And I once said to a very famous player, very wealthy, like, "Where are you staying?" He said, "Oh, I'm just at the Radisson." And I looked at him and he said, "Coach, you know where I grew up." That's all he had to say. Like, the Radisson is just fine. He doesn't have to be at a Four Seasons. Now, if they're going for a week and it's a vacation and they've earned the money, great. But they know where they're from, as does Will Smith. And so they're happy to see the other superstars.
And you do carry that stuff forward. I mean, and rightly so. You don't want to have to deal with someone who acts as if they are entitled to, the suite at the Four Seasons. You don't. I mean, keeping it real is more than a cliche. And I think it was Will Smith who said you don't forget how you grew up. Even the fear of financial insecurity doesn't go away despite having 9 or 10 figures, zeros in your investments. You carry it with you, and that's part of gratitude, and it's part of whatever passes for humility in successful human beings is not forgetting where you came from.
As it happens, I have a story about that that you wrote. So this one's a little controversial. This was when you talked to Louis C.K.
Well, it wasn't controversial then.
No. It was just funny then. Yeah. But I'm doing it now. All right. So he says, a few weeks ago, Chris Rock called and said, "You want to go to the Knicks game?" We went to Madison Square Garden. We were right on the floor. And it was, what's his name? Anthony, the new guy? And then you're like, Carmelo. It's like, Carmelo's first game. We went up to that fucking suite where all these people were eating. Politicians and mobsters and Chloe Sevigny. Is that how you say her name? Chloe Sevigny?
Sevigny, but I don't know.
I don't know how to say your name.
I'm not sure she knows how to say it.
There's this spread of food, and I'm like, let's fucking eat. Chris goes, nah, let's get down to the floor. I'm like, you're taking this shit for granted, Chris. There's roast beef and a guy with a hat serving it. I wanted it so bad. I was starving. He's like, who needs it? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'll probably never get here again. So we go down, and I'm watching Carmelo, and I hear this song, Louie Louie. And I look up, and I see my own face on the Jumbotron. And Chris says, you know what, man? You've got your own show, and I'm on Broadway, and we're on the floor at Madison Square Garden. How fucking great is this? And we high-fived, and we just felt so good. Both of us were in our 40s. This shit could disappear instantly, never to return, and it will.
Well,
pretty good.
It also reminds me, I asked Chris Rock, was there a point at which you knew that you had made it? And he described driving home after a set. He was living in New Jersey. I think he still does. And Seinfeld called him and asked him, because people were getting together. And so, Chris Rock turned around and headed back into the city for the thing. Seinfeld, he goes, that's when he knew that he was successful. I mean, I don't know, everyone has some version of imposter syndrome. I don't think anyone expects to wind up a megastar or in Louis' case, a fallen star. But it is what we were just talking about. It is a matter of personal grace to be able to humble down and to realize this isn't going to last forever. You didn't necessarily get it on your own without a lot of help and a lot of luck. And I always love asking people that question of, celebrities, was there a point at which you knew that you had made it beyond your wildest dreams?
Our guest yesterday on the show was Sue Bird, who's one of the best players in basketball history.
Yes.
And has hit all the big shots and won all the Olympic titles and everything. And David asked her, a question like that, and she basically was like, "I've never felt that way."
And that, to me, that not only is that a great answer, but
Yeah.
I've kind of, to the extent I've enjoyed any success, somehow buying into it means surrendering the idea that you really are grateful.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. I don't maybe model it the way I want to, but to realize if I had a career in the media, a lot of the credit for that goes to accidents of birth in terms of being a white man at geography, a white man in America, all that stuff. You forget that stuff and you're not headed in a good direction. It's great to hear that Sue Bird, who I remember as a college, a freshman, just a brilliant, obviously a Hall of Famer. Yeah, you don't want to, it's one of the things, again, not to keep kind of dragging LeBron into it, but to the extent anyone knows me at all, it's as a LeBron hater.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I admired then and will always admire is he never forgets that he was a kid from West Akron.
Yeah.
Well, to be clear, Sue Bird, after when she first said she never thought of herself that way, then she started kind of naming the things she's done, and she finished by saying, "I guess I realize it right now for the first time."
Well, I think both those things are
Great.
contradictory at all.
Yeah.
You know, in a way that I sometimes look at the Esquire, and I used to look at the masthead every month just to see my name on there.
Still there.
And there's a real sense of you know what, I'm okay. At least for now, I'm okay. I did these things. That's important too.
David and I were talking this morning about that particular moment when Sue said that. Was so not how an NBA player would answer that. And to me anyway. And I think part of that is this machismo thing where, like, if Sue really felt like that, but was LeBron's teammate, it would be seen as a sign of weakness for her to say, "Oh, I'm not totally sure I belong here now." Right. So the answer you get, and David, a lot of these players trust David and he counsels them through these things. So to David, they'll admit that they have this imposter syndrome, as you describe it.
All the time.
But to me, with a microphone, they're like, "Listen, I was fucking born for this shit," right? You just have to, like, deflect any sense of weakness, which is so boring to me.
Well, I think part of it, and this is something I think I've only come to understand a little bit since the last presidential election, the kind of distress, the kind of trauma, the kind of fear that I have felt as the country has plunged further and further into, let's just say, despair. I think especially a young African-American man grows up with it, again, in most circumstances, not all certainly,
Right.
but that shield has to be there. You cannot trust and you cannot appear to be vulnerable. And I think I did not understand the extent to which that was true for women and for people of color, and particularly for African-Americans until 2016 and now. 4
Totally.
years. Yeah, where we're all our vulnerability and our fear is everywhere right now.
Yeah.
Well, and Henry and I were talking this morning just on that subject. We were talking about athletes, and you mentioned this, Scott, not really understanding, in a sense, the vulnerability they have to show in front of everyone. This is exactly what Henry and I discussed today. The actors that you spent time with are lauded for being able to show vulnerability when they're pretending to be somebody else, right? They're celebrated that way. And if they fail, if the movie may have failed, but they're not seen as a failure if they were able to show that vulnerability. That does not work in athletics in their minds. And if you fail enough in terms of missing shots, you don't keep your job.
No.
It is failure is baked into the formula, and you've got to be able to stomach that. And so part of this bravado, which I think is unfortunate, I don't want my players to feel that. I'd rather always deal with the truth and just understand that you're going to miss shots. That's part of it. But many of them feel like it's a shock to miss. I will miss the next one. And that's how they get through it, because they're going to miss a lot.
I don't know, fundamentally what it takes to bring that strength. It doesn't mean that you don't feel the vulnerability, but to turn it into a positive, to make that effort constantly, even though there's 100 or more people that ready to take your job should you miss enough shots. I'm not sure what it takes, but it's good to have resources, you and anyone else, that can help provide a baseline of security, because I don't know how you perform under that kind of relentless scrutiny with a bottom line that's clear to everyone. Percentages, numbers, there's no arguing with the data. I can't imagine operating under that kind of pressure.
Well, and someone looking just like you trying to keep you from scoring. Like, no one's playing defense to Chris Rock. Either he's funny or he's not. But no one's bombing him with, stuff. I used to say Picasso didn't have to paint while being tackled.
It's amazing. It's amazing when you break it down and think about it. All those factors, to just be able to go out there and play your game is a heroic effort.
Right.
That's another funny part of this week, actually. Another guest we had was the Wizards GM, Tommy Shepard, who has said a lot. Like, he's basically like, don't expect the game to be anything like what we're used to when they come back. Sue said the same exact thing. And, there's some sort of, conditioning thing there. But it struck me, they said longer comments and sort of processing them in my head. I'm like, I think there's more of like a performance anxiety part of this than we usually are aware, right? The fact that everybody's not quite ready for game shape, I don't think it's so much about, like, it is somewhat about quads and glutes and stuff, but I think it's also just like, you've got to get your head ready to have LeBron James across the court and make good choices.
I can't imagine. I mean, going back to any job at this point means that kind of getting yourself psyched up, but also realizing you're in uncharted waters, doing it under, I can't imagine more bizarre circumstances than a pro athlete returning to a sport where there are no fans, for example.
Yeah.
It really is. The stress involved in that, the uncertainty involved in that, it would be huge obstacles to overcome.
Should we read another little bit of your writing here?
You think?
I guess the thing that's developing is, like, when I'm over here, I'm you, and when I'm over here, I'm the interviewee. Okay, this is the code.
Good luck with that.
All right, so this is Scott here. This is talking to Chris Rock. I'm writing a book about LeBron. I'm a Cleveland guy. I'm mad at him. I don't even see what the big story is. Cleveland's hurting, Chris. Cleveland deserves to hurt. I said that wrong. Deservedly so hurts. But I'm telling you, weather alone should have been cause for panic. He's got a loyalty tattoo. Loyalty to friends. And all his friends are right there. God bless him. They all wanted him to stay. No, they didn't. They all wanted to go. And by the way, he's surrounded by 6 25-year-old black guys. Where do you think they want to be? They want to be in Miami. I know that you're right. I'm just having a hard time getting over it. It's the weather, dude. I can't believe no one's read the article. If Dwayne Wade played in Milwaukee, LeBron would not be in fucking Milwaukee.
Yeah, but looking back, I spent a lot of time in Miami, LeBron's first year.
Yeah.
Because I set out to write a happy book. I mean, I tried to get publishers interested. LeBron's last year in Cleveland, we didn't know that. Danny Ferry's last year on his contract as GM, Mike Brown's last year. The more time I spent in Miami, the more I understood not just what Chris Rock was saying was true, but it's kind of a marvelous, in the same way California is a nation state of its own. Miami is an amazing city in a way that anyone who doesn't spend time there can't. I'm not saying I know Miami, but I think what Chris Rock's saying is true. It's funny. One of the things about the Horror of Akron about that book is I always felt, because I had a book deal based on my rage. Everyone knew I wouldn't have access to LeBron. But if LeBron and I were playing horse for real money and you rolled the ball out on the court, LeBron's not going to be showing any mercy to me because I'm a fat old writer. And I always felt I wasn't going to show any mercy to him having left Cleveland. And even under those circumstances, I liked Miami. I grew to really be fond of Miami. And eventually, LeBron came back.
Judy, do you want to weigh in here on behalf of Miami anyway? Judy grew up in Miami.
I just want to agree with everything you've said, Scott. Miami is a magical place, and you're right.
It is. Even watching the weather roll in, over the bay, I can still remember a thunderstorm. look, I've lived in Austin, Texas. I've lived in Los Angeles, lived in Philly, lived in Iowa. It's not like I ain't never been out of Cleveland. I live in New Jersey now. I thought Miami was exactly what you said, a magical place.
When at Judy's wedding, Judy's married to my brother-in-law, John. At their wedding, which was in New York, there was tremendous music and a conga line broke out. And so we're in the conga line and with one of Judy's friends from Miami is right in front of me. And I'm like, I assume this is just every day in Miami. And she's like, yeah, if the light goes red, we all just get out and do this.
At the arena too.
No, that was true.
I've never seen people who love to party, even though the second half had already started. The mojitos, in the concourse, everything. And, it was a way of life that I could only envy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And listen, Chris Rock was right, but if Dwayne Wade wasn't in Miami, I don't think he would have gone there. Henry and I talked about LeBron moving. I think I told Henry January of that last year in Cleveland, I think he's going to go. I just saw him play a game live. I said he's done in Cleveland. I think he's going to team up with Wade in Miami. I had no inkling about Bosch. I think Chris is right, but I also think Wade had already shown he was willing to be the second guy on the Olympic team. And LeBron needed someone that good that also wouldn't fight with him.
Yeah, this is, to me, and you know better than I do, but to me, the bottom line motivation for a professional athlete is to win it all. That doesn't mean that family and friends aren't important. It doesn't mean that but in terms of career ambitions, and I think about this because people are still arguing Michael Jordan versus LeBron, et cetera. And I always think about the fact, I don't think Michael ever won a title without Scottie Pippen. That doesn't mean that he wouldn't have. It simply means that you join up with the crew. Durant did the same thing. And I think LeBron's decision to go to LA, might have been different in some ways from what I'm talking about. But I do think what matters most, I don't think I'm just projecting my own BS, is to win. Is to be recognized as a champion and to get that chip that no one can ever take away.
Well, you're not wrong about the Lakers move. Henry is one who reminded me at that point of LeBron's career, LeBron wasn't doing anything without a plan. He went to LA knowing Davis was coming before the trade deadline, and the Lakers just screwed that up.
Yeah.
That's all. And as did his agent. If they had quietly worked behind the scenes, Davis would have been in LA a year earlier, and maybe they would have won that year as Golden State was breaking down.
Yeah.
But he went to LA knowing Davis is coming.
It's one of the things makes me sad just as a fan is that, and again, I don't get involved in these LeBron versus Michael, who's the GOAT. In my head, I do. Well, is that, one story has an ending, Michael's, the other one doesn't. And we may never know, but based on pandemic, we may never know what might have happened this season.
Right.
But we do know that LeBron's otherworldly battle versus Father Time isn't going to end well for LeBron. It never does.
Scott, your book has the word Dayenu in it.
Dayenu.
I'm
Jewish too, so
possibly 1,000 times. It struck me as maybe a useful concept now.
Yeah. There's a reason. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you go.
No, you were going somewhere with Dayenu.
No, it just struck me that it's a book about LeBron, but it's much more about you.
It is. It's a memoir. It's
a memoir.
The second one, which again, nobody read and nobody. But the full title of the second one is
You're Welcome.
You're Welcome, Cleveland. I helped LeBron James win a championship in David City. But yeah, the Dayenu is a Passover thing. It would have been enough had the Lord brought us. It would have been enough, is what And I was referring to the perverse string of hideous defeats that every Cleveland fan has witnessed over the course of however many years.
Right. So, but come on, that same mental approach applies in a pandemic, right? There's a lot of.
This is freaking biblical now. Seriously.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So there's a part of the Passover Seder is enumerating the plagues while dropping. So you got your murder hornets.
Right.
You got everything. Killer. What are they calling these? Killer murder hornets?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this, I know that at least my parents lived through the Great Depression and World War II. This is the same kind of definitional event, and in some ways worse in terms of its omnipresence and invisibility outside of people getting sick and sicker, dying. So nobody knows what's on the other end of this. I'm 67 now. So I'm just hoping to get through it and hoping that, like all of us, that we and our loved ones stay as healthy as possible. But
how's everybody at your house? Everybody good?
I'm knocking wood here. Everyone's good. I did get exposed on March 7th and 8th at a Big Ten wrestling championship in Rutgers. And the guy that I went with, a friend who's still in the magazine business, had a colleague test positive. So I started becoming mildly symptomatic on March 13th. I ran a mild fever. I did not have any other symptoms. I mean, I did have kind of a little bit of brain fog, but that's normal anyway. But it's May 14th, and so far so good. We're all okay. But I live in a nice little suburb in Essex County, and people walk around here, no distancing, no masks. And it's frankly, I mean, to me, it's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We feel the same. I want to ask you something, Scott. I don't know if you ever watched this Seinfeld show as a fan. Obviously, I know you interviewed him, but there's a famous show where George asks him not to be funny. So George could be the funny one. And there's a line where George says, "You can't not be funny." And Jerry says, "No, I cannot be funny." And then but before I ask you the question, Chris Rock, with his first breakout movie, I think, was Lethal Weapon 3.
Huh.
With Danny Glover and Mel Gibson. And I read articles many years ago that they literally had to beg him, stop. Nobody can film with you because they're just laughing so hard when he was doing nothing. He just could not be funny. My question is, you've interviewed Jerry, you've interviewed Chris, you've been around these magnetic, charismatic, brilliant actors and actresses. Can they turn it off and just talk to you as a regular person? Or do you always feel that energy from them?
Generally with the comics and of all the, if you want to classify people, out of all the performers, comics, stand-ups in particular are closest to my heart. There's even more to them. In other words, I think for people who act, there is a difference. There is a noticeable difference in on-screen and off-screen. Less so with comics. I was thinking about this with Louis C.K. When we met, one of the things we did was just grab a meal at the Comedy Cellar, which was like a dream come true for me.
Wow.
And he cut his cheeseburger in half, and I said, "You're not going to, why? I've never seen anyone, I've never seen a man cut a cheeseburger in half." And he said, I always tell my daughters that there are people hungry in the world, and whatever you need, you only need half of it, and you should eat. Anyway, to the extent he was showing off, or it wasn't that kind of profile. Again, it was a Q&A. Right. What always sticks with me, and this is true even, I don't know how familiar you are with Doug Stanhope, who's as dark can be in terms of a stand-up. But I always looked at every interview, whether it was a Q&A or a longer, kind of deeper profile, as a chance to try, because all these people have seen 1,000 jackasses with recording devices before, to try and keep it human and make it human. So I've always, I think, prided myself on trying to go a little deeper. And what I found over and over again, even with a guy like Seinfeld, is the funny is always there. That's not something you can turn off. But there is a real human being who's generating that. And even though I don't think it's always conscious, turning it on and turning it off, it's always worth, if I can ever quiet myself down, it's always worth trying to take in what you're not seeing, or to listen carefully and not just for the laugh line. I hope I answered that, because it's
amazing.
Yeah.
Let's read some more of your work. I particularly enjoyed this. I'm sure that you're asked all the time about how to get into this business. And on your website, you wrote this: "The writers I know are insane. They don't know how not to write about stuff. It's like pro athletes often say about their sport. They'd play for free. Writers love to write, and not because it's easy. Getting it right isn't easy at all. And that challenge is a big part of why writers love to write. It's a high, working on your game, a way of being in the world that feels absolutely honest and true. Anyone, especially in his or her 20s, saying, I have no time to write because of a job or anything else, is full of crap. Writers write. If you can't find time to write, don't worry about becoming a writer. You're not a writer. You'll never be a writer. Find something else that lights you up.
Yeah, I still, I wonder because, no, I don't wonder about that. I wrote that and I still feel it.
I love that.
But I do wonder now, and this is, it's not therapy, but.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I spent a lot of time fooling around, messing up. I didn't make a living as a writer. I mean, literally, when I was 40, I was selling columns to an alternative weekly in Philly for $40 a column and having them rejected. I was more of a literary guy coming up, and my graduate degree is a Master of Fine Arts. And, getting into the magazine writing was a matter of tremendous good fortune. But when I left Esquire in 2016, I had the second LeBron book to write, the second memoir posing as a LeBron book. But I also thought, this will give me a chance to rediscover that sense of excitement and delight in writing. And the truth is, I've done very little writing. So, I still think I'm a writer because I have, like Sue Bird, I can look at the stuff. But at this point, those words feel a little more self-accusatory. That
Sorry.
I think it's a good and healthy thing. That's why I say it's not therapy. But you do hear that. You do hear this, and I think it's true in any field. There must be a shortcut. There ain't no shortcuts. There's as many shortcuts to being magazine writers now an oxymoron because ain't no magazines really to speak of. But, it's like saying, yeah, man, there must be a shortcut to get to the NBA. I guess, maybe I won't go to college. I'll be Kobe or I'll be LeBron or No, there actually aren't. You really have to practice constantly. You really have to work on your weaknesses constantly. And that was always true of writing. And the truth is, I already knew when I was 10, 11 years old and a miserable young thing, this was my only chance to kind of control my own narrative was to write poetry. So, I mean, I love hearing what I wrote, and I think that particular blog post actually inspired a lot of response. But I don't think I'm walking the walk these days. That's all. I'm
available at the present time if you want to yell at me for my review of your book.
No. One of the things about that book is what my editor and dear friend, since retired, David Hershey, called success d'esteem, meaning it got great reviews, not yours, which was on a Monday in the art section below the fold, along with Harvey Araton's piece about when the garden was Eden. Two more unlike books I can't imagine. And to say there's no grudge is an understatement. You and I have gotten together before this. But
we're good at disagreeing. It's okay.
And I'm saying we're not disagreeing.
Oh, perfect.
At least from my point of view, you seem to feel I must harbor some ill will, and I assure you, I do not.
No. I just didn't want to I didn't want to hide from it. If you wanted to talk about it, we're good. That's fine.
It wasn't even that negative.
Okay, great. I don't remember, to be honest, but you brought it up in the warm-ups.
Their heavy hitter Sunday New York Times book review guy, I think Dwight Garner is his name.
Yeah.
And he had quoted the book had two, what do they call it, epigraphs. And he had quoted one of them. So everyone's expectation at HarperCollins was it was going to get a Sunday New York Times book review.
Yeah.
And the book made a splash at the time, but ESPN, because the book really excoriated ESPN, didn't touch it at all.
Yeah.
Nobody was even allowed to mention it. So there was some disappointment. It was not, believe it or not, it was not personal, that the book was never a bestseller. But, for me, I was already close to 60 years old and with a great magazine career that really was well established before LeBron ever got to the Cavaliers. It's all been gravy, including a New York Times book review by Henry Abbott. So
it's the only thing I ever wrote for the New York Times.
Well, that might tell you everything. No.
Yeah, no, fair. The weirdest part of the whole deal was that I got a call about it, and they're like, maybe this, combined with this Harvey thing, which was a very strange deal, but okay. And then I kid you not, the way that it happened was after it was very kind of loose. I don't even know if it was really an assignment until suddenly it had to be done. And I had like maybe 24 hours notice, like it has to be done. And so, which was all fine, except it was Christmas.
That's right.
I literally wrote that review on Christmas Day. And like, while the kids are opening presents, I'm like, hold on.
That's what you do. That's why there aren't any shortcuts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you did a good job. And I'm not blowing smoke. I mean, this is how you get to wherever you want to get to.
I guess so. Yeah.
You don't go, it's Christmas, I can't deliver it. You always deliver it. Or you don't get to do it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like missing the shots, what David was talking about. You don't get to do it anymore.
I mean, so that's true. And like, I went to NYU, where down the hall, it's 100% like actors and filmmakers, and they're unbelievable, right? They're super, super good at what they do. Also true of writers, I think there's just a surplus of us, right? Like Esquire doesn't need you. They have other people who can do a good job, right? Same with basketball players. These are very desirable industries. So in those industries, I think it's 100% true where like, yeah, you missed an assignment, you're probably just not going to get another one. In another world, I think probably some editor could get better work out of you or me if they did care a little more and nurture a little more and have a little bit of a longer view and, conjure some kind of improvement, which might let you miss an assignment now and again, but it's not the world we live in.
It isn't. I remember talking to Bill Murray, I think, about the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
I do remember that, yeah.
He was talking about, I mean, he loves Wes Anderson. He was talking about how difficult the shoot was and how many weeks it went on. And he was saying, it better be the best movie ever made or I'm going to hunt Wes down, even if he's in a hut in China. And I said, that must have been really hard work. And he said, and we had been talking about, I think either Charlie's Angels or Garfield. Before that, he worked the same hard on all of them. I really, I always tried to learn. I remember profiling David Cohn, the pitcher.
Yeah.
And he talked about how many years it took him to learn that under stress, with runners on, it said that it took him years to learn to try and take a few miles off the fastball rather than try and throw the hardest pitch he'd ever thrown. All these lessons are transferable if you're listening to whatever you do. And right now, more, we're all talking about the frontline workers and, the heroes. And, that's all BS. The way that we treat human beings, the way that we pay human beings, and this was true long before COVID-19, that's what tells the truth about how much we value people. And I don't think, again, my good fortune, I still can't believe it. And it's not to discredit myself, whatever modicum of talent, whatever work ethic, but luck plays such a huge factor, and walking the walk plays such a huge factor. And one of the things that I always felt, just in terms of the privilege, and not all my work by any means was celebrity driven. I'm a real writer too, but these are successful people. I better open my freaking ears and listen to what they're saying. There might be something I can use here. And there always was.
Why
So
do
you're
you
going to
think
write a
not
self-help
writing?
book now?
What?
Yeah, I don't know what? Sorry, David, you go ahead.
I was looking at Scott, you said you're not writing so much now. Why do you think that is? And what are you doing instead?
Well, I think for a couple years, it might have been depression. In other words, I loved the magazine work, but it was hard. And toward the end in particular, there were very few of us filling the pages of Esquire. I left because the parent corporation chose to fire the guy. I mean, before Esquire, I had written for GQ for 5 years with a features editor named David Granger, who became editor-in-chief of Esquire. So my career with Granger covered 25 years, and I was in a position when they fired him to leave. I mean, and to leave with some dignity and some grace. Then I had literally 4 months to write the second book. There, to write 60,000 words
Whoa.
about the Cavs winning a championship. So I got that in October 27th, 2016. And this is a story. I signed an NDA, so I'll try not to be too specific. Meanwhile, I was involved in this ESPN 30 for 30 called Believe Land. I mean, just a series of unbelievable events. The Cavs won the championship after, you don't need to hear this, but I do, after being down 3-1 against 73 and 9 Golden State Warriors. I got to go to a parade in Cleveland with my kid. I'm going to start crying in a second.
That's awesome.
It was filmed by, then the Cavs go up 3-1. It was not a happy experience writing the second book. I don't want to, drag other people's names through the mud, but the first one was a dream. The Horror of Akron was a dream. The second one was more or less a first draft, but I got it done. And then when the Indians went up 3-1 against the Cubs, my agent called a company that does ads that run immediately after every game 7 or whenever a series ends, wanted me to do the voiceover for the ad if the Indians actually beat the Cubs. As we all know, that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
The ad never ran. The ad, in all meaningful forms, never even existed.
Do you want to recreate it for us now a little bit?
Oh, it was great. Oh my God. It would have been so good. And I got paid anyway. So really, I wasn't even middle class when I grew up. Honestly, I wasn't. So all this stuff is the stuff of, I didn't even dream dreams like that.
Right.
But it is true that after the election, and then our son started college, so the nest was empty. Then the dog died, the family dog died. And I think for a couple of years, I was in a really deep funk. I was also, over the years, had carried massive amounts of weight. I mean, I topped out at about 380 at one point. So at one point a couple of years ago, I made a sustained effort to get in much better shape and just to get more active and more positive about stuff. And I'm not saying, I had written, a Q&A for a website, and when The Athletic opened its Cleveland edition, I had written a column for the opening, but a lot of it was, again, not modesty. It's just, what, I turned down an awful lot of work. I didn't want to do magazine piecework anymore. And there are young people, young women, young people of color, the voices that really need to be heard. I've had nothing but success. And part of it, I think, was depression. And I'm, if anything, over-therapized over the years. I mean, I wouldn't be here talking without the help that I got.
Yeah.
But I do think that, seeing the country go downhill day by day by day. And now, I still function at a much higher level. The writing, if it's meant to be, I believe will be. It's nothing I ever had to force, except for the fact that it was my job for 25, really more like 30 years. So that drained it of some of the spontaneity and sense of discovery and joy, because you're writing to a word count, you're writing to a deadline, all that stuff. So again, I'll be 68 if I make it till August. So I'm not trying to pressure myself in that regard. My job has been, because I think, especially in North Jersey or anywhere in the Northeast, that our lives are going to be affected for a very long time by this. So I've been devoting all my time and energy to making sure we have bulk supplies here in the house, since my wife and I are both over 60. Mm-hmm. I think that's how I got this hernia, was literally unloading supplies and breaking down boxes at my age.
But you have a shopping injury?
Well, I prefer to think of it as a physical labor injury. When you're having 25-pound sacks of rice, or flour, or that, and you're older and you're not used to physical labor beyond tapping a keyboard, I'm pretty sure that the hernia is the result. Yeah,
I think we all know the scheme you're playing of getting the supplies for the family. What has been your biggest score? Like, what was your greatest victory of shopping in the pandemic?
Oh, there's been a few. I turned into quite a logistics guy. I'm a multiple supplier guy. But getting wipes is still impossible, and that's fine. We can make our own disinfectant wipes. But getting the nitrile gloves from a restaurant supply place.
Nice.
But
Nice.
also, I want to give a shout out to, there are a couple outfits in North Jersey that existed, one of which existed. These are small farm to market grocers who are still doing curbside pickup, and who are, they're not lifesavers, but what it means is being able to get fresh produce. Because, I mean, even in the stores here, and it's North Jersey, not Texas, but there are a lot of sick people walking around. The testing here has been a joke in New Jersey, a joke. And spot testing is still showing over 20% positive. So when you're over 60, both my wife and I are, you don't want to be going to a grocery store if you can possibly avoid it. So yeah, I'd say that Triumph was getting 1,000 nitrile gloves, but every time, you really do take a lot of stuff for granted, not just people, but material objects too. Getting fresh bell peppers, getting fresh mushrooms, that kind of stuff. We've been eating great. Thanks to Lisa, thanks to my wife. But I've been a key part of that supply chain, brother.
Yeah. Noted.
We all serve our role.
We don't have that much time left, but I did want to, I've just recently dove into your work, and I'm realizing, I think if I were your editor, what I would say to you now is, Scott, you know very well a lot of these characters from Trump world. Mark Burnett, Chris Christie, and on and on.
I interviewed Trump. I sat with Trump in 2015. Yeah.
I feel like a lasered in kind of view of what did you learn from those people that informs how you see all this crap now?
Nothing I didn't know already. There are people for whom morality consists of who has more money and who has more power. I will say that I did do a story recently, and I don't know what Esquire is going to do with it. It's a long story about a guy. I don't know if people are as aware as they should be that there was a sex scandal at Ohio State University where athletes were preyed upon by a university very much like Penn State, very much like Michigan State. This involved not primarily wrestlers, but and I love college wrestling from my years living in Iowa and knowing Dan Gable a little bit. So this is basically focused on a guy, he's still a wrestling coach, but who wrestled at Ohio State during the years and was a victim of this doctor, and who was also there when Jim Jordan, the congressman from Ohio's 4th District, was an assistant coach. So to the extent I'm not going back to add, there are plenty of people out there doing great work, about what's going on in politics right now. I was looking for a story that focused on sexual abuse, and Jim Jordan, when he was an assistant coach, was in his 20s and was not a perpetrator, but he was someone who was there and who now denies any knowledge whatsoever of something everyone, particularly in the wrestling room, knew about. So to the extent I've been able to put anything together that's in any way relevant to what's going on now, again, I don't know what the magazine, I think they're only publishing 6 issues a year now.
Yeah.
At Esquire.
We got a question. I got a private question from someone saying, what have you learned of the important elements of cultivating a good working relationship with an editor?
A lot of it is sales, and that doesn't mean that you're tricking anyone, but if people don't enjoy working with you, beyond, clearly talent can take you a long way. And to hang out as long as I hung out, basically the same boss for 25 years, the fit has to be there. And I don't know, it's kind of like when I was, my first date, I was already, I think, a high school junior, and my mother said, okay, you're very nervous, just be yourself. And I was very sarcastic, at least in my head, to the extent I recall. It's like, that's the problem, is I can only be myself. If I could be Brando or Nicholson tonight, but you're not going to be able to fool anybody. If you can make people smile, if you can make them laugh, then they're going to like being around you. But so much of that is out of your control. I do think that, and David, you talked about this. Henry, you talked about this in terms of writing the review on Christmas. You better deliver the goods. You better hit the shot. You better turn in your copy, or it doesn't matter how much fun you are to be with. Unless you've got some kind of pressure or leverage, all you can do is deliver your stuff to the best of your ability, on time, every time. And the cultivate part, I don't know. It's like how you cultivate any other relationship. Be as honest and as forthright as you can, and don't lie. Don't assume you're going to trick people, and don't assume that the person on the other end is your mother, your father, or anyone else. They have their own self-interest, and you are there to become indispensable because you're so damn reliable and you're not a total jackass. Best you can do.
I like it. We usually end the show where Gerard Hector joins us from his apartment in Manhattan, and then he asks better questions than we ask. Let's do that. There he is. Oh, actually, he went to Paris for a second.
Yeah. Paris is that's the preferred destination these days. Scott, thanks for joining us. One of the themes that have been sort of weaving through your discussion with Henry and Coach has been this idea of the humanity in people, right? And in the context of this conversation, the humanity in athletes, you talk specifically about, sort of just only recently, right, coming to see that when you connected with Nerlens Noel. And I wonder, because the humanity in athletes particularly, because I'm in media, is something that is near and dear to my heart and very important. I mean, for the obvious reasons, right? Like we share commonality in pigment tone, right? So I wonder for you, why was it so hard for you to see the humanity prior to, and then that's indicative of, I think, a larger population of people. Like why is that so hard to do?
It's interesting because I came up let's say upper lower class, and because I didn't make a living as a writer through my 20s and 30s, I worked a lot of menial jobs, and I worked menial jobs all over the country, and I worked with a wide range of people and a wide range of pigments. So I fancied myself. We didn't use the word woke then, but I listen to, I still find Mingus or Dizzy Gillespie. I thought I was like a cool guy. What I had to come to terms with, particularly with LeBron, is the inherent racism. When you're I'm a Jew, and I was raised by European immigrants, and to them, anyone outside the tribe was heathen. It didn't matter if you were Southern Baptist, a snake handler, a Catholic. If you weren't a Jew, you were the other. So I did not recognize the extent to which I had othered others until I had to come to terms, for example, in the first book, The Horror of Akron, calling LeBron and Rich Paul and Maverick Carter and Randy, the sarcastically, the Akron chapter of Mensa. I really, again, it sounds ludicrous, but the truth is, it taught me a lot over the ensuing years about how deeply embedded that sort of othering, that sort of racism had been reinforced my whole life as a sports fan. I'm not sure I'm directly.
No,
you know what
you are.
Yeah.
I do. It's a conversation I have with fans all the time, and I think you bringing up the Randy, Rich Paul, and that crew. Yeah. I mean, I don't think people understand like what that is. Like LeBron brought those guys in, and they learned from all the best people, and he empowered them now to start their own business. Yes. And as Black people, like that is a huge thing that I don't think, if you're not, you don't understand. Like that's humongous.
And what LeBron has done, I think there are at least 3,000, they were elementary school students for whom he arranged. I mean, there are billionaires who own the Cleveland Cavaliers, billionaires who own the Cleveland Indians, billionaires who own the Cleveland Browns. Not one of them or all of them combined has done as much as LeBron James. LeBron James hasn't got a pot to pee in compared to the money that those human beings have. So this idea of bringing people along is something I benefited from every day of my life and career without anyone thinking it was racist. Right? I mean, I didn't even realize this. And it's not to pretend that somehow I'm some paragon of wokeosity, but it's just I had to learn the basic truths of American life from looking in a mirror at myself. And to the degree that I've had to do that since the 2016 presidential election, not liking what I'm seeing at all, I enjoy doing this enormously, but I haven't been unhappy shutting the F up over the years either. because mine is not the voice the world needs to hear right now.
We're allowing the word wokosity on a one-time basis only.
Could have said wokosity-tude hood, but no, I dialed it back.
All right. Thank you so much, Gerard, David, Scott Raab, and everyone for joining us. Judy. All right. We'll be here tomorrow.
Be safe,
Thank you.
everybody.